This module, titled Communicable or Infectious Diseases, is provided in support of Introduction to Public Health at Orange Coast College. Let's start by looking at the burden of disease caused by communicable diseases. For many centuries, communicable diseases were the leading cause of death and disability among all ages, but especially among the young and the old. Communicable diseases are not only the cause of great epidemics, but they can also become endemic and become routine causes of death. These diseases play a key role in maternal deaths associated with childbirth, infant and early childhood deaths, and deaths of malnourished infants and children. So we have the cause of death being infectious diseases such as tuberculosis, where at one time 1 in 7 deaths were attributed to tuberculosis, malaria, the plague, and treatments for things like tuberculosis were fresh air and certain medicines. This is a picture of a sanitarium where individuals who had tuberculosis would go to heal, and you could see the nice windows that open so that they can get this fresh air. Here's another picture of a facility, and you'll notice the long porch where they would put rocking chairs and individuals would sit outside again to get fresh air because they felt this was beneficial. And then in the early 1900s, we saw a dramatic reduction in deaths and disability in developed countries caused by communicable diseases and infections, and this was due in large part to public health efforts to prevent infections, often with vaccines, to improve sanitation, and to control other infections. I have a short video that will present Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanatorium, so let's take a look. Notice all of the different public health interventions that are incorporated into this sanitarium program.
Let's have a look at one of these sanatoria, or tuberculosis hospitals as they are called today. Real hospitals for the tuberculous, and not merely resting places. Here we are in a large southern sanatorium. This one has beds for 500 patients. Altogether, there are now 90,000 such beds available. Rest and more rest, as Trudeau discovered when he himself took the cure as a young doctor. Yes, and good food. Nowadays, doctors don't stuff patients with more milk and eggs than they can digest. Just good, well-balanced meals, enough to gain weight on. Smell those delicious loaves. New ways of resting the lung have been developed. This patient is getting pneumothorax treatment. Air is let into the chest cavity, and that rests the lung so that it can heal. When the diseased lung is fully healed, it is allowed to expand again. A lifesaver for many. Each patient is helped to find his place in the workaday world when he leaves the sanatorium. Here's a class in typewriting. In this sanatorium, as in many others, children of tuberculous parents who cannot be properly protected otherwise are cared for in a special department of the sanatorium.
From the mid to late 1900s, there was a brief respite from the many infections. Even as great accomplishments were underway, warning signs of bacteria resistant to antibiotics began to appear. Organisms resistant to current antibiotics began to plague hospitals in the 1950s until new antibiotics were developed. In the early 2000s, we have seen the return of infections that were previously under control, as well as an emergence of new diseases. Tuberculosis, the great epidemic of the 1700s and 1800s, has returned in force, partially as a result of HIV and AIDS. Over a dozen previously unknown infections have emerged in recent decades, the majority of which are believed to have originated in animal species. As you can see on this slide, I have CDC current outbreak list. The CDC is the go-to organization with regards to infectious disease monitoring in the United States. Let's look at today's CDC website to see what the outbreaks are and what travel notices are in effect. Here is the CDC homepage. If we scroll down, you'll see a list of outbreaks. The top 3 are related to Salmonella. The 4th one, flour, is E. coli. So if you want to find out more about these outbreaks, of course you'll click on the link and it'll take you to additional information. So you can see that this is from June 24th, 2019, and several brands of flour have found to have E. coli. And so it's not all flour, but just certain brands of flour. And so it's all listed here. Okay? And then if you go back, if you want to know about backyard flocks and the salmonella, again here you can see that there's a notice. Since May 16, 2019, some illnesses have been reported in 41 states, 279 cases. All right, so these are all outbreaks. And if we then return to the home page, we can also find information about travel notices. So if you're going to travel and you want to know if there's any infectious disease that you should be concerned about, they'll show up on the travel notices, and you'll see that they have warning level 3, avoid non-essential travel, alert level 2, and watch level 1. So level 3, the CDC is recommending that we don't travel to these areas. Level 2, they're just giving us a precaution to make sure that we're immunized. So example, here's some polio in Indonesia. Make sure that you're immunized. And then lower here, these are practice usual precautions in terms of level 1. 3 key terms related to infectious disease are endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. An endemic is the usual level, the usual incidence of an infectious disease for a local area. Here the definition says an infection is said to be endemic in a human population when that infection is maintained in the population without the need for external inputs. So for example, there's an endemic level of the flu. We know that the flu happens during certain times of the year, and we do take precautions, but until a large group of people are infected within a geographical area does it become an epidemic. When diseases cross boundaries, that's when they become pandemics. Influenza is anticipated to return again in pandemic form, as has occurred repeatedly in prior centuries. A pandemic is an epidemic occurring worldwide or over a very wide area, crossing international boundaries and infecting a large number of people. A pandemic of influenza is most likely to occur when ongoing mutations produce new strains capable of person-to-person transmission. History suggests that public health and medical interventions have and will continue to have major impact on reducing the burden of communicable diseases.